The wind howled like a hungry beast across the white Arctic wasteland. Snow whipped through the air, biting anything it touched. David moved carefully through the storm, his boots sinking deep into the snow. His breath came out in thick clouds, and his goggles were fogged. But he didn't stop. He was used to cold, silence, and danger. He was a former soldier. Now living alone, searching for rare metals buried under the ice, this land was silent, deadly, and empty, or so he thought. Today felt different. He had found strange signals on his scanner, something warm under the snow. It was impossible, but real. As he dug deeper with his shovel, the metal hit something soft. Then he saw it, a flash of silver and blue. Not ice, not metal, but something else. Something alive. He dropped to his knees, scraping with his gloves. A face appeared, pale blue with closed eyes and white hair covered in frost. Then another, two women, side by side, nearly frozen to death, half buried under the snow. David's heart pounded. They weren't human. Their skin was glowing, faintly like soft moonlight. Their bodies were wrapped in strange silver armor that didn't look earth-made. He touched one. She was still alive, barely. The other one's fingers twitched. "I don't know what you are," he muttered, "but I can't leave you here without wasting more time." David pulled them out of the snow one by one. They were light, lighter than they looked, and ice stuck to their skin like glass. He wrapped them in his coat and dragged them on a sled back to his cabin. The storm grew stronger, but David moved fast. His cabin was small, wooden, and deep. In the valley, it was the only shelter for miles. Inside, he lit the fire, added more logs, and placed the two alien women near the heat. He covered them with blankets, then turned on a small heater nearby. Their lips were blue, their skin too cold. He didn't know what they were, but they looked fragile, like porcelain dolls from another world. David watched them carefully, hoping they would wake up. He made some soup for himself but didn't eat it. He kept staring at them, questions growing in his mind like wildfire. Who were they? Where did they come from? Why were they here, frozen in the middle of nowhere? Suddenly one of the women moved, her eyes fluttered open, golden eyes that shimmered like fire. She looked around confused, then her gaze locked onto David. She whispered something, voice dry and soft. He leaned closer, and she spoke again. "Husband." David blinked, unsure if he heard right. The second woman stirred, her body shaking slightly. She opened her eyes too, same golden glow, and she also looked at David. "Husband." She said. He sat back in shock. "What?" He said aloud. "Why are you calling me that?" They didn't reply, only reached toward him weakly. Their hands trembled, and light pulsed from their skin like soft waves. David didn't move, not. Yet he was trained to react, to defend. But these women didn't seem dangerous. They seemed lost, broken, desperate, like they had traveled across the stars and ended up in a place too cruel to survive. One of them touched his arm. Her fingers were warm now, warmer than before. David felt a strange feeling in his chest, a connection. He didn't know if it was real or just his imagination. But something inside him whispered, "Protect them." He stood up and said, "You're safe here." Though he wasn't sure if they understood, they closed their eyes again, breathing. Slowly, outside, the wind screamed, and the snow piled higher. Inside, the fire cracked softly, and the mystery deepened. David didn't know what he had brought home, but deep in his gut, he knew this was the start of something far bigger than just survival. The air in the room felt charged now, like the world had shifted. He sat near the fire, watching the two strange women sleep. His rifle stood in the corner, ready. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone, somewhere far above Earth. A blinking red light began to flash in orbit. Something had detected the sisters' presence. Something was coming, and David had no idea what storm he had just invited into his quiet world. Asterisk, the snowstorm passed by morning, but the silence it left behind felt heavier than before. David stood at the window of his cabin, watching the white world stretch endlessly. His breath fogged the glass, but his mind wasn't on the cold. It was on the two alien women lying near the fire. Still sleeping, still glowing faintly, still whispering in their dreams. They had called him husband, not once, but twice. Not as a joke, not by accident. They said it like it meant something ancient, like a title that came from somewhere. Far beyond this world, David didn't sleep much. He checked their blankets, made sure the heater stayed on, and sharpened his old survival knife, not because he felt threatened, but because he didn't know what would happen next. He had trained for war, not for alien brides from space. When morning light crept into the cabin, the taller woman opened her eyes again. Her golden eyes scanned the room slowly, then landed on David. She sat up, her movements graceful but weak. Like she had done this hundreds of times in another world, she spoke softly, her voice like wind moving through glass. "Where is this place?" "Earth," David replied, keeping his voice calm. "Northern ice region, no cities nearby." The second woman woke up too, blinking fast. She looked at her sister first, then at David, then around the room. Their eyes met again. And David felt something strange in his chest, like pressure, like static electricity before a lightning strike. The taller sister placed her hand on her chest and said, "I am Lyra." The younger one did the same. "I am Saren." David introduced himself simply. "I'm David. I pulled you from the snow yesterday." There was a pause, then Saren whispered, "The bond has started." David didn't understand. What bond? He asked. Lyra looked at her sister, then at David again. "You were chosen, not by us, but by the old light," Saren added. "You pulled us from the ice. That means the prophecy is awake." David raised an eyebrow, confused and on edge. "Prophecy? I just dug you out." Lyra shook her head slowly. "You don't understand yet, but you will." Then she raised her hand and pointed toward the window, toward the sky. "Our world is gone," she said, "and those who destroyed it will come for us here too." David moved to the window, looking out. Everything seemed the same, cold, white, quiet, but something inside him was starting to shift. He had seen combat, seen things no man should see. But this was something else, something big, and deep down, he felt it wasn't a coincidence that he found them. Later that day, Lyra asked to step outside. David gave her one of his heavy coats, but her armor underneath was still glowing softly. Saren followed her silently. Stood in the snow, faces turned to the sky. Then they both closed their eyes, and for a moment, the snow around them stopped falling. The wind paused, just for a second, and David felt the hairs on his neck rise. When they came back in, Saren spoke first. "A signal has been sent," Lyra added. "They know we are alive." David's jaw clenched. "Who's they?" Saren's eyes darkened. "Hunters that night." David searched their armor with permission and found something hidden in a panel. A small glowing device, humming gently, with a screen that showed symbols not from Earth, but somehow. David understood what it meant. It was a tracker, and the coordinates were locked on his cabin. Suddenly, the fire crackled louder, and the lights flickered outside in the distant snow. A red dot blinked once, then vanished. David grabbed his rifle, instincts kicking in. "We need to move soon," he said. "I know trouble when I see it." Lyra walked closer and touched his hand. Her skin was warm now, her touch calm. "You are not just a soldier anymore," she said. "You are part of our fate." David didn't reply. But he didn't pull his hand away either. The cabin that once felt quiet and safe now felt like the eye of a coming storm. And in that storm, he was no longer alone. He was being watched, he was being chosen, and above them, somewhere in space, something was already moving, something that wanted the sisters back, dead or alive. The night grew heavier, like the sky itself was watching. The fire cracked softly. But the air in the cabin felt tight. David couldn't sleep. Again, he sat in silence, sharpening a blade that he hadn't used in years. Across from him, the two alien sisters were awake now, their golden eyes reflecting the firelight like twin stars. They hadn't spoken much since the tracker was found. David knew they were hiding something, not out of danger, but maybe out of fear, fear of what would come next. He had questions. But every answer they gave only created more questions. Finally, Lyra spoke, her voice barely louder than the fire. "There is something we must do." David looked up. "What?" Saren joined her. "The bond must be completed or we will die on this planet." David's eyebrows pulled together. "You said that before. What does it mean?" Lyra stepped closer, her silver-white hair falling over her shoulder like snow. She knelt in front of him, eyes steady, glowing with something ancient. "It is not about mating, not in the way you think," she said softly. "It is about connection. Survival and truth," Saren added. "Our bodies cannot fully adapt here. Unless we are linked with someone native, someone with strong life force." David didn't reply. He had never been one to believe in magic, rituals, or destiny. But there was something in their voices, something raw, honest, almost sacred. He looked between them, then finally nodded. Once slowly, "What do I have to do?" he asked. They moved to the center of the cabin. Clearing a space on the wooden floor, they sat down, facing each other, David in between them, their hands reached out. One hand on his chest, the other on his forehead. Then they began to hum. A soft, vibrating sound, not a song, not a language, but something that made his bones tingle. The air turned warmer, the fire bent sideways, and the light in the room shifted to a soft, golden glow. David's eyes closed without his command, and what followed felt like falling into someone else's dream. He saw visions, a broken world cracked by fire, oceans turned to dust. He saw the sisters, younger, running from ships with red lights. He felt their fear, their hope, their loss. Then he saw himself pulling them from the snow, not once, but in hundreds of visions. Hundreds of lifetimes, the ritual showed him. That this wasn't the first time, not the first Earth, not the first David. The bond reached across time, across stars, across something deeper than science. He wasn't chosen randomly. He had always been a part of their story, even if he never knew it. Suddenly, David gasped and opened his eyes. The room was quiet again, the glow gone, the fire normal. Lyra and Saren looked at him, calm, breathing evenly. "You are now part of us," Lyra said gently. Saren added, "And we are part of you." David felt different. He could hear their emotions. Even if they didn't speak, he could sense their heartbeat like they were synced to his. And strangely, he didn't feel alone anymore. Not in his mind, not in his soul. The bond had filled something that had been empty for too long. They moved to sit near the fire, closer than before this time. When Saren rested her head on David's shoulder, he didn't pull away. He stared into the fire, feeling the weight of it all. He hadn't asked for this. But he wasn't running from it either. But outside in the white night, something else was moving, far above the clouds, far above the snow. A dark ship entered Earth's sky, invisible to radar, silent like death. It had come for the sisters, and it had no intention of leaving without them. Inside the cabin, David whispered under his breath, "What did I just become?" The snow was quiet that night. Too quiet. Not a single branch moved. Not a single owl called. Even the wind had stopped breathing. David stood outside his cabin, boots buried in the snow, eyes on the sky. He didn't know why, but his chest felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to begin. Inside the cabin, Lyra and Saren were asleep, curled under blankets. Since the bond ritual, their skin had stopped glowing, but their presence had grown stronger. David could feel them in his mind now, their emotions like ripples under water. He could sense they were peaceful for the moment, but that peace wouldn't last. Something was coming, and he knew it wasn't human. Suddenly, a sharp buzzing noise cut through the air. David turned, his instincts flaring like fire. A red light blinked once in the sky, then vanished. Moments later, a dark shape moved above the clouds, silent, massive, watching. It wasn't a plane, it wasn't a drone, it was a hunter's ship. And it had found them. David ran inside, locking the door, grabbing his rifle from the wall. Lyra woke first, eyes wide. Already knowing, Saren sat up, breathing fast. "They are here." David nodded. I saw the ship. Lyra stood, her face hard. They won't stop until we're taken. Or dead. David loaded the rifle, checked his knife, opened a locked chest. Inside were old military supplies, flares, a short-range jammer, and one EMP grenade. These things, he said, they bleed? Saren nodded. Yes, but they do not feel. He looked at them both. Then we fight. The cabin became a fortress. David covered the windows, set traps outside, laid wires in the snow. Lyra showed him how to activate a glowing blade hidden. In her armor, Saren gave him a small alien device that turned invisible in his hand, a shield. For a moment, soldier and aliens worked together like they had trained for this their whole lives. Then came the sound, low, inhuman, mechanical, and sharp. Like metal screaming under pressure, David stepped outside with the rifle aimed high. Snow fell gently, but the air burned with energy, and then he saw them, 3 figures, tall and armored. Walking through the storm like shadows, black armor. Glowing red eyes, no words, just movement. Slavers, hunters. The ones who destroyed Lyra and Saren's world. David didn't wait. He fired the first shot. One of the hunters stumbled, sparks flying from its chest. The others moved fast, inhumanly. Fast traps triggered a flash of flame, a blast of smoke. The second hunter fell, its armor cracked by the explosion. The third reached David before he could reload, but just as it raised its blade,
Lyra leapt through the snow.
Her glowing blade cutting down hard, the hunter fell. Its head rolling in the snow like a metal helmet. David breathed hard, adrenaline. Pounding, but it wasn't over. The sky above them opened again. A second. Larger ship appeared. Not hunting, but scanning. They've sent a beacon. Saren said, her voice shaking. More will come. David looked around. His cabin was broken. Smoke rose from the traps. Blood and wires stained the snow. He had never asked for this fight, but it was his now. He looked at the sisters. Standing strong in the snow, side by side, they had lost a home, lost a world. But maybe, just maybe, they had found something here worth fighting for. We can't stay here, David said. We need to move. Saren nodded. They will track this location again. Lyra pointed south. You spoke of a hidden base? David looked out into the white horizon. Yeah, he said, and if we make it there alive, we might just have a chance to win this war. Behind them, the sky rumbled like thunder. The stars above blinked, and the hunters were already on their way. The fire had died. Smoke curled slowly from the ashes, and in that silence, something inside David shifted. He looked around at the broken walls, shattered glass, and blood-stained floor of the cabin he once called home. Now it was just a ruin. A battlefield, a place marked by death and invasion. Lyra stood beside him, her armor torn, one arm holding her side, where the hunter's blade had cut through. Saren was kneeling near the corner, using a glowing tool to scan the fallen hunter's body. He didn't speak. No one needed to say it. They all knew the cabin was no longer safe. David had built this place with his own hands years ago. After the war, it was supposed to be quiet, forgotten. But now the stars had come knocking at his door, and they weren't finished yet. Lyra walked to David, her golden eyes still calm despite her pain. You saved us again, she said. David shook his head. No, I fought to survive, same as you. Saren stood up, holding a small orb in her hand. This was inside the hunter's skull, she said. A memory node. David raised an eyebrow. Can it be read? Lyra took it gently, pressed it to her temple. For a moment, her body stiffened. Then her voice dropped. They're calling for more, she whispered. A full squad is on its way. David stared at the door. Knowing there wasn't time. We have to move, he said. There's a hidden base, south of here. Military grade off-grid. It might still be active, Saren nodded. We need shelter and a signal shield. They won't stop hunting us. David gathered what supplies he could. A few weapons, some dried food, batteries, maps. He helped Lyra into a thick coat, wrapped. Saren, in an extra thermal cloak. Then he stood at the door one last time. His eyes scanned the room, the table where he once ate alone. The fire he once lit for peace. The chair he once sat in to forget war. Now, All of it was behind him, burned, broken, and watched from above. He closed the door behind them. The wind howled again. This time colder, sharper, like it knew what was coming. Together, the three of them moved through the snow, leaving footprints toward the south. The white sky stretched endlessly ahead, but the danger now followed from behind. For hours they marched in silence. David led the way, checking his old route markers. The sisters walked close. Too quiet for someone being hunted. That was when they saw the man. An old figure stood near a tall, ice-covered rock. Wrapped in dark furs, long white beard, eyes shining like polished steel. He didn't look surprised to see them. He simply said, "So it begins again." David raised his rifle. Slightly, "Who are you?" The man smiled, not in fear but in recognition. "You don't know me," he said, "but I know what walks beside you." His eyes shifted to Lyra and Saren, the twins of the final bloodline. Lyra narrowed her eyes. "You speak of the old code." The man nodded slowly. "And you brought it to him." He looked at David. "You're not the first human they've bonded with." David stepped closer, confused, alert. "What are you saying?" The man turned, motioning for them to follow. "I'll show you. You're ready to remember what you never knew." They followed the man through a narrow ice path, hidden between white cliffs. Soon, they reached the edge of a frozen valley. And in the middle of that valley stood something impossible. A giant black structure. Buried halfway in the ice, pulsing faintly with alien light. It wasn't human. And David's heart beat faster as he saw it. Saren whispered, "It's an ark." "From our world?" The man nodded again, "and it's been waiting for him." David stepped forward slowly, the moment his hand touched the structure's surface. The entire valley shook. Light spread across the walls of the ark, ancient lines. Glowing like veins, a door opened without sound. Something deep inside whispered his name. Lyra stepped beside him. "It's choosing you." David turned to her. "But why me?" Saren replied softly. "Because you're not just part of this story now," Lyra added. "You are its center." Behind them, the sky cracked again. A new hunter ship entered the atmosphere. Closer, faster, armed. But this time, David didn't. Step back. He walked into the ark, into the heart of what he didn't understand. Because he knew now, running was no longer an option. Asterisk, David collapsed to his knees as the door of the ark sealed behind him. The air inside shimmered with light that had no source. Strange symbols floated along the walls like they were alive. And deep in the structure, something ancient stirred. Something that recognized him, even though he had never been here before. Lyra and Saren stood beside him, their hands gently resting on his shoulders. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. David's heart was racing, not from fear, but from something deeper. A storm of memories, memories that didn't belong to him. It started slow, a soft pulse behind his eyes, like someone knocking on the inside of his skull. Then flashes images too fast to hold. A golden planet, a burning sky, a throne of stars, a man with Lyra's eyes, a woman with Siren's voice. A war fought in silence, and a promise made in blood. David grabbed his head. Gasping, he was seeing lives, moments, places. But they weren't his. They were from another time, another world. And yet, they felt real, too real. The ark had awakened the bond fully. And now it was sharing everything the sisters had locked away. Not just their pain, not just their past, but something they had hidden, even from themselves. Lyra stepped in front of him, her voice steady, but low. "You are remembering now," Saren added. "The ark has accepted you, and through it, our history flows into you." David looked up at them, confused, breathing hard. "But why me?" He asked. "I'm not one of you." Lyra knelt, placing her hand on his chest. "You carry a spark that came from us," she said. "Long ago, our people sent a seed into space, a part of our bloodline, to mix with another world." Saren continued, "That world was Earth, and that blood now lives in you." David stared at them, struggling to believe. "I'm our alien." Lyra smiled. Not cold, not cruel, just calm. "You're part of both," Saren said. "That's why the bond worked, why the ark opened, why the prophecy sees you as more than just a man. The room around them lit up. A large sphere in the center of the ark began to rise, humming with low energy. It showed Earth from above, then zoomed out to reveal dozens of red markers moving toward the planet. Enemy ships, slaver fleets, war machines. David stood, fists clenched. "They're coming for you," he said. "And now they're coming for me too." The sphere changed again, showing blueprints. Weapons, ancient machines inside the ark, were tools from their old world, sleeping until someone worthy woke them. David stepped forward, touching the interface, and the ark responded to his touch. Lights bloomed, doors opened, machines activated. He didn't just understand them, he knew them. As if they had always been part of him, buried under the skin, Lyra whispered, "The old kings were warriors, but they fought with honor," Siren added, "and their line continues in you." David stared at his reflection in the glowing surface. He looked the same, but he could feel his blood moving differently now. He could hear things, not with ears, but with awareness. The ark had changed him, not into something else, but into what he was always meant to become. He turned back to the sisters. "Then we fight," he said. "Not just to run. Not just to survive, but to end this." Lyra and Saren stood with him, their armor reforged by the ark's light, their eyes brighter than ever before. Saren raised a hand. "They're close now," she said. 2 days, maybe less," David nodded. "Then we use this place." The ark shifted again, showing a giant cannon buried beneath the ice, a defense system powered by star cores. Untouched for centuries, David walked toward the controls. No hesitation now, no fear, because in that moment, he wasn't just a man with a cabin, he was the last guardian of an ancient empire, and the memories that weren't his were now the keys to saving the future. Outside, snow began to fall again, but deep beneath the ice, sleeping giant was finally waking up. The earth trembled beneath the ice, not from weather, not from war, but from something ancient and alive, something waking for the first time in 1,000 years, and at the center of it stood a man, not a king, not a god, but something in between. David. He stood inside the heart of the alien ark. Hands on the glowing controls, his eyes, once dull from years of loneliness, now shimmered with light pulled from distant stars. He was changing, not in body, but in spirit and soul. The blood of 2 worlds ran through his veins now, and neither could be denied. Lyra and Saren stood by his side, dressed in reforged armor made by the ark itself. Their faces were calm, but their hearts beat fast. They had lost their world, their people, their past, but in David, they had found something new, not just a protector, but a future above the earth. The sky cracked. Dozens of slaver ships tore through the clouds, silent and deadly, their weapons charged. Engines glowing red. They were not here to talk. They were here to erase what had survived, but this time Earth would not be helpless. Not while the ark stood, and not while David breathed. The ground above the ark split open. A giant tower rose from the ice. Alien metal shimmered in the light. Massive cannons turning toward the sky across the hidden valley. Ancient drones awakened from their frozen sleep. Machines of war built not by humans, but by a lost empire. David spoke, and the ark listened. "Target every hostile ship," he said, his voice steady. Defend this world. Inside him could feel it all. The satellites above, the flow of power in the ark. The heartbeat of the sisters beside him. He had become the link between past and present. Between alien legacy and human will. He was the key, the chosen one, but only because he had chosen to stay when he could have run, to fight when he could have hidden, to protect when he could have surrendered. The first enemy ships opened fire. Beams of red light struck the ice, exploding snow and steel. But before the flames reached the valley, the ark fired back. Brilliant blue energy sliced through the sky, and 3 enemy ships fell in seconds. David didn't flinch. He was already watching the next wave. Lyra moved beside him, touching his hand. "You are no longer just human," she said. Saren smiled softly. "You are ours now, in more ways than one." David looked at them both, then turned to the command panel. "This world is our home now," he said. "And no one takes it from us." The final battle began. Aliens dropped from the sky in black armor, but they found the valley waiting. The sisters moved like light, blades glowing, hands casting energy. David led them, not behind, but ahead, the soldier. The guardian, the one who had once lived alone in a cabin, now stood at the front of a war. The Ark powered him, protected him. It healed his wounds before they formed. It read his thoughts before he spoke. He didn't fight like a man. He fought like memory, like destiny, like a storm that had been building for generations. And when the last enemy ship fell in flames above the clouds, when the last hunter collapsed on the snow, David stood tall, his breath calm, his heart clear. He had not just survived, he had become something more. As the Ark lowered back into the ice, silent once again, Lyra and Saren stood beside David on the ridge. Behind them, Earth was safe. Before them, the stars waited. "You could come with us," Lyra said. "To rebuild," Saren added. David looked up at the sky, then back at them. "I think," he said slowly, "I already did." A soft hum filled the air, and a small ship, sleek and silver, descended into the valley, the last gift from the Ark, a vessel for the next chapter. David walked aboard, the sisters by his side. As the ship rose above the clouds, the world below faded into a memory. But the legend had only begun, because the man who had once lived in silence, who pulled two lost sisters from the snow, was now written into the stars, not just as a soldier, not just as a savior, but as the first earthborn guardian, the man they called husband.